Only one Toronto newscast can prepare you for the future. Hillary Brown and the CBC at 6. News for the 90s.
What's important to me about directing my own services is that I'm the one who's in control. I'm responsible for the outcome of how my assistance is provided, and this increases my independence and my control, my freedom, all those good things. If I'm the one in control, then I'm directing how it's done.
That's great. Thanks.
Welcome to a special edition of the Disability Network. I'm Susan Pettit, and this is Woodeden near London, Ontario, the location of a conference called Flying on My Own. This conference is unique. It's the first ever to help plan future attendant care organized by the users themselves.
One thing that we never really followed through on, we were looking at sort of the interaction between the consumer and the attendant.
This conference comes at a crucial time because the provincial government is planning far-reaching changes in the way long-term health care services are delivered to people with disabilities and the elderly. This has prompted fears that some of the existing services, in particular the use of personal attendants, could fall under the control of the medical profession. We cannot be truly independent, these people argue, unless we can hire and fire our own attendants. They are saying, in effect, to the government, give us the money to do our own hiring, don't channel it through other people over whom we have no control. If that happens, says Hazel Self, a conference leader, she and many others could lead a fuller, more productive life and could move about with the freedom most of us take for granted.
My services are tied to the building where I live, so if I move to a different location, I leave behind the support services I need for daily living. And at this conference, we're of like mind of wanting to direct our own care and manage those services to the degree that we're all able and desire.
Carole, could I ask you to get it out for me?
Audrey King has required attendant care throughout her entire life. Her philosophy is one of looking at the wellness of an individual, and that must begin with self.
Well, it's very important to me because I know what I need. I've lived with my disability for a long time. And if the person who is assisting me in doing the things I need is able to listen to me and take their direction from me, not only can I help them by instructing them in the best way to do it, but also the act turns out the way I need it to turn out.
I met him at Morrison Residence. I was attendant there beginning in the winter of that year.
Vic Willi sees David Malone as a friend, as well as an attendant.
Attendant services are, in a nutshell, really an extension of a person's arms and legs. They're a service that enables a person to be undisabled, if you will. I guess I could sum it up best by saying it just makes me the kind of person I was before I became disabled. It makes me an independent person. On one hand, that seems quite simple, but really that has had a profound impact on my life.
Attendant services, by definition, you are self-directing. I think that's certainly an important building block for our planning today. If we're in agreement on that, then I think that'll make this afternoon's planning a lot easier, because that'll be an important part of the issue.
Together we're strategizing on how to really put the final cap on convincing the province of Ontario that what we want in terms of self-direction is actually good for society, in terms of lowering the cost of attendant services, in terms of making it more possible for us to participate in work and in other activities of ordinary life for adults.
It might be, in fact, better to say at the end of that, for needs instead of physical needs.
Judith Snow is one of Canada's best-known and most effective advocates for the rights of people with disabilities.
There would be no life without attendant services. Back in 1979, I was dying in a chronic care hospital. I wasn't expected to live more than another year. And here we are in 1990. I got my own attendant services in October of 1979. And so you see, there I am.
It takes a certain individual to do this kind of work, a special individual. It's not everyone's cup of tea.
And in 1 minute from now, we'll meet some of those special individuals.
Is it fair for Margaret to push me as opposed to be really myself?
Very fair. Yeah.
I don't like that idea. You don't like that idea? Okay, we'll switch.
The other side of the equation is the relationship between the users and the attendants themselves.
It's very important that the dignity of the caregiver be at a very high, the respect for the dignity of the caregiver be at a very high level.
We have a relationship where we can enjoy each other's company as well as my helping her out.
The most difficult thing to explain to the neophyte about attendant care is this issue of what this relationship really is. And I mean, I've heard it described as almost a Zen-like quality, that the closer you get to it to look at it, the less you see. And sometimes during a routine, this attendant care, this relationship is functioning. There are almost no words spoken, as you can imagine. People get to know each other better, you know, and get to know the routine. But to answer your question, that's a very difficult question to answer. You know, it may be that in some circumstances, friendship might intrude on the relationship. Friendship is really a separate part from the attendant care relationship, wouldn't you say? I mean, it can exist outside the relationship.
Oh, it can, yeah, I think, sure. You can get to like somebody and not necessarily become his friend. In our circumstance, when I'm doing care for Vic, it doesn't feel like work, and it doesn't feel like care. It's gone beyond that to the point where I would help him out almost as though I were doing him a favor, like I might help somebody bring in some wood or do the dishes or something like that. I don't mean to trivialize it, but it's not something that I feel like I'm being put upon to do.
I don't think you need any formal training, as in learning to communicate and to treat people with disabilities as normal people, but to learn...
Esther Riesling is Debbie Willows' attendant.
Basically, the person who is disabled can usually help you. They can usually explain it themselves, so it's not too difficult, actually. It's really quite simple.
So is it training on the job, then?
Yes, basically it's training on the job.
Deb, do you think that this kind of relationship is important for any person who requires attendant care?
Yes, it is, because you need to have confidence in your attendant and to have that one-on-one deep relationship, because I travel a lot and we travel together and we're in many different situations, many countries, things aren't always the same, and to have an attendant that knows exactly what you need and how to do it, even though you're directing your own care. And when you're in different circumstances and you work well together, that really makes life a lot easier.
I believe that you have to really listen to what the person wants.
Darrel Murphy helps other disabled people find attendants.
If a person wants their hair parted on the right side, and you as a staff person part your hair on the left side, part the person's hair on the right side. Let them choose the clothes they want to wear. And if they're fussy, that's important to them. Let them be fussy and do what they need. The other thing is the attitude, to go in with a positive attitude. Don't go in over-caring. We're dealing with adults, and because we're dealing with adults, don't smother them with care. Some people, once they've had the care, that's all they want from you. Leave, thank you very much, I appreciate it, I got my life to get on with.
They are two diametrically opposed perspectives.
Many of the people at this conference are unemployed or underemployed. For some, attendant care support in the workplace is still virtually non-existent. Bob Loveless feels this is another reason disabled people should be permitted to use government funds to hire their own attendant.
I think that moving attendant care out of the home is the fundamental issue to integration of disabled people into society. And I guess I see employment as probably the #1 integrator and normalizer for individuals with disabilities. So attendant care moving into the workplace is really the prerequisite. Individuals will need assistance with the personal needs of life if they're out of the home for 8 or 9 hours a day. It may mean assistance over lunch with being able to be fed. It may mean assistance right on the job. It gets into the area of job support, doing some of the things that I can't do for myself. Basic setup, for instance, in the work site, or accessing various of the manuals and reference books that one needs on a job. So it's a fundamental issue. You can even take it beyond that, Susan. There's a need often with a business career to travel. To put a personal perspective on it, I'm constrained in my career choices in the company I work for if I'm not able to travel. I obviously cannot apply for a job within the company if I cannot travel. The employer at this point is not providing any attendant care for me to travel, nor is the government. So I'm euchred.
Coming up next, going home in protest.
I don't like the militant attitude of what we're going to tell the government to do.
Why are you leaving?
Well, because I don't like the militant attitude of what we're going to tell the government to do. I'm not going to be a pussycat when I've dealt with government either. I've dealt with them in many agencies. I want to be treated as an equal. And they've always treated me as an equal. What I get the feeling is that they're always sort of one step behind, and they're thinking, you know, we're going to demand this and get it. Well, I don't think the government is going, it might make accommodations, but it isn't going to just give carte blanche and say, do what you like.
Colin Tyler's views were not shared by most of the people at this attendant care conference that he abruptly left.
That the one about assistance with a range of functions would come as number 4, so...
As we said earlier, this is the first time in Ontario that men and women who use self-directed attendant services have come together to decide what they want from the Ontario government. The conference comes at a crucial time because the government is planning a major overhaul of long-term health care services for disabled persons and the elderly. At the same time, says Ian Parker, a conference organizer, there is a real fear attendant services could become health-oriented. That is, fall under the control of the medical profession.
Because attendant services are completely non-health kinds of services now. And we must safeguard that and go forward and not allow any kind of deterioration in our independence as disabled people, not as sick kind of people. So this is a key and crucial time now, and in the next year we will be following it very carefully.
It's very, very basically medically oriented, charity oriented, welfare oriented, the way the services are constructed and provided right now. We as consumers are saying, let's get out of that mode, let's get into the participation mode. Let's get into the independent living mode. Let's get into the rights and responsibility mode. And by that kind of a shift, you can see that so much more is able to be accomplished. Also, interestingly enough, it's cheaper.
How much cheaper?
It's always hard to say because you're talking about individual situations. But often you find huge savings like 33% or 50% over the cost of keeping somebody in a hospital.
One of the key things is to get the word out, both to government and the public, about what kind of people we are and what these services really mean to us, how extremely valuable they are. In terms of freeing people from the bonds of medical model and the charity ethic where we've been treated before, allow us to become self-actualized, independent people, contributing to society. That's what I'd really like to see happen, a real educational process where we become normal in the eyes of the public for once.
What do you feel most passionate about?
Well, this very issue of getting things that other people take for granted. You know, I just want to work. I just want to be normal, and I want to go about my own business. And to have to fight, to have to constantly come to conferences like this and carry piles of paper around and make phone calls and devote half my life just to getting those things that other people take for granted. I guess that really gets to me.
First of all, thank you
Thank you, Bob, and it is a pleasure to...
The appearance of one of the most powerful ministers in the Ontario government shows the kind of clout disabled persons are starting to wield on the political scene. Charles Beer is Minister of Community and Social Services and a key player when it comes to the needs of disabled consumers.
So you're going to use this in your program?
Beer is someone who believes the best way to understand the independent living philosophy, which he claims to embrace, is to imagine yourself disabled.
I think that when you try to put yourself in the shoes, as it were, of another person, to focus then on what would that be likely to do to you? How would that change? And one of the key things, I think, is you say, well, look, my mind is still functioning. The things that I want to achieve in life, my hopes, my aspirations, those are all the same. None of that has changed. And yet, undoubtedly, you find that other people are looking at you differently, that they're looking perhaps at you as being somebody who perhaps is no longer a whole person. And so how do you change that kind of mental attitude and get through to people, and in my case, say to get through to caucus members, to cabinet colleagues, that, okay, there's some very important things that we can do, in some cases small things, that are going to be of direct and real help to these individuals. And remember, as one person said tonight, if you have a physical disability, it doesn't mean you're sick. That's not what's at issue. There are a whole series of attitudinal problems, if you like, that we have to overcome so that people can go ahead and lead the full lives that they want to lead. And I think, that's an important thing to try to understand.
In the area of self-directed attendant care, what do you feel most passionate about?
Well, I think that we have to make sure in the changes that we're bringing in that we provide opportunities for that, so that particularly, those people who are really anxious to move in that direction and take control of their own lives have that opportunity. Now, I realize in making that goal or that objective real, that there's some hard issues that we've got to wrestle with and we've got to develop, and that's why we're looking at some pilot projects. But I have no doubt that where we will ultimately end up is that those individuals who have physical disabilities, who want to ensure that they can control those decisions, are going to be able to do it.
Are only providing to, let's say, 2,200 people.
Coming up next, the icing on the cake.
And there are many more people.
Now we'll go to ministerial statements. The Minister of Community and Social Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of myself and my colleagues, the Minister of Health, the Minister responsible for disabled persons, and the Minister responsible for senior citizens affairs, I wish to announce that the plan for the comprehensive reform of long-term care, called Strategies for Change, has been released today.
Just a week after the London conference, Charles Beer stood up in the Ontario legislature and announced that as part of a new government initiative, 500 people with disabilities would henceforth be able to use public funds to hire their own attendants. Several people who took part in the London conference held a news conference here at the Ontario legislature to express their delight at Charles Beer's announcement. In other words, it was a great moment for disabled people right across Ontario, especially for veteran advocate Judith Snow.
I think this expansion is a direct result of years of work that consumers of attendant services have been involved in for, well, in my case, 20 years. And the conference that we had last week was a very significant step, because we got together, we clarified our thinking, we got nailed down our plan. We have a plan for working with the minister, and we have a plan for encouraging him to work with us should he decide to change his mind.
As soon as I leave my front door at the moment, I leave my service, which I need for survival, behind. And the fact that I can take the individual with me opens up more doors of possibility for me.
We hope you've enjoyed this special edition of DNet. But before we go, Joe has joined me here at Queen's Park to share a few letters from our viewers.
This first letter is from Lena DiCarlo from Toronto. Dear Joe, I have recently been made aware of the Disability Network, and I have been watching the program as often as I can. I find the program very informative and long overdue. The award presentation segment was so typical of able-bodied people. If it wasn't so sad, it would have been funny. I agree with Sue that attitudes are changing, but like you, I am fed up about going through service elevators and garbage entrances. We cannot give up. I wish it wasn't like this because, frankly, I am tired of having to fight for everything other people take for granted as their right.
This letter is from Chris Emberson of East York. Dear Susan and Joe, I saw your program for the first time yesterday, and I was very impressed. Congratulations. It's about time we drop our gloves, so to speak, and begin to speak out against the humiliation we have suffered as a result of our disabilities. Thank you.
Next letter is from a viewer in Ottawa, Daniel Murray. I have often watched your broadcast and found it quite interesting. I would like to suggest for your consideration a significant abuse of the rights of the disabled, which you might like to report on. The Canada Immigration Act excludes potential immigrants to Canada if the examining physicians report that the applicant might pose a burden on the health services. The Canadian rule is applied absolutely, even breaking up families to discriminate against the physically challenged. Despite the professed highest priority of the Canadian immigration laws, being the reunification of families, the exclusion of the disabled is in fact the paramount interest. It is time that popular opinion be mobilized to abolish this last legal remnant of irrational and immoral prejudice.
This last letter is from Joanne Levesque of South River, Ontario. Dear DNET, I am not a disabled person and must confess I had never thought about disabled people much until a good friend of mine suffered a stroke that crippled her. It was then that I began to notice how frustrating some of the simplest tasks in life that I take for granted can be for someone confined to a wheelchair. Why must some of us wait until we are disabled before we care enough to help? I know it is media programs such as yours that will eventually wake us up.
We'd like to get letters from our viewers, so please do write us. Our address is the Disability Network, CBC Television, Box 500, Station A, Toronto, M5W1E6. That's the Disability Network, CBC Television, Box 500, Station A, Toronto, M5W1E6. For those of you with a fax, you can fax us at 416-975-5636. I'm Joe Coughlin.
And I'm Susan Pettit. See you next week.
This is no life here. You get up, somebody feeds you. You watch TV, somebody feeds you. You watch TV. They give you drugs to keep you calm so you can watch TV.
Next week on the Disability Network, The Quiet Room, a Nova Scotia play that examines suicide and the rights of people with mental illness.
But if you've been good so long, then you get to get walks around this hell of a home just so you can see where you cannot be. It's not even exciting enough to be hell. It must be purgatory.
We have to protect the weaker members of society.
Only from yourselves. Only from the stronger members of society, not from themselves.
Yes, from themselves and from each other. You can't just let someone jump off a bridge because they want to. You can't take back this choice. Halfway down the jump or the moment you pull the trigger is too late to see what a tragic mistake you've made. There are so many people who don't want to end their entire life. They just want to stop what they're feeling at the time.
So you punish them.
This is not punishment.
This is punishment.
When the clock strikes 11, only one newscast can give you the real picture. Ona Fletcher, weeknights on the CBC at 11, News for the 90s.
Tomatoes,